Welcome to today's show. I am your host, Eric Darnley Small. And on today's show, I'm going to follow up on my last video in which I start going through what I believe happened in the 2024 election last week. As always, if you guys like what you see here, please like and subscribe. And you can also click the bell so that you're notified of new content when it arrives. In addition, as you know, if you've seen my videos before, I am going to reference a lot of other material from other places. Links will be at my Mastodon at mastodon.vtip.me/@ what you missed. That Mastodon, I think, is going to be a place where you can also reach out to the show, reach out to me if you have any questions, comments, etc. Of course, you can also do that down in the description below as you have on other videos. So today I want to go through this really quickly and hopefully keep this from being too long a video. Continuing on from my previous videos, and I like this quote. And it says, winning doesn't make you right, losing doesn't make you wrong. And that's from the former Republican representative, David Jolly. And I'm going to reference where that video comes from in a minute. But I want to go into, in more detail, how we got here. Last video, I detailed what I believe happened on Tuesday. I want to now talk about how we got here and how the past impacts the present. And we're living in the new normal, or will be living in the new normal. I think the election was a new normal. Most people did not expect what happened to happen. So it's a new normal. And I want us to sort of get used to that. But I want us to also understand what it is we're doing and what the goal of these videos are. And in my last video, I started to express what I think happened on election night. The goal was to hopefully give context and a point of view on what I think is happening in the country. And I'm going to expand this out in future videos about what I think is happening in the world. But as far as America, and that's the point of this video, as far as America, Trump won Democrats because Democrats got the electorate wrong. And they assumed that women and people of color would be drawn to the ballot box over reproductive rights and workers' rights, and that they would vote against Trump. That didn't happen. Split ticket voting is now a thing. That's the new normal in politics. Voters are voting one way for local races and another for federal elections. How do I know that? Why do I say that? Well, we know that, as I indicated in my previous video, in places like Missouri, in places like Montana, in Arizona, which went for Trump, all of these states went for Trump big time, and they also put into their state and local charters, their constitutions, protection for women's rights, $15 or $13.75 minimum wage, etc. So those are progressive ideas in red states that voted for Trump. That was something that previously was unheard of and didn't happen. It's happening now. In this video, I want to give my opinion on how we got here. I want to begin by dispelling the notion that Harris lost because she ran a bad campaign, or that some other Democrat could have won. You're seeing a lot of people, particularly on the Democratic side, on the left, saying that Harris it was more of a coronation and it was a contest. She didn't have enough time. Others on the bench, Josh Shapiro, Gavin Newsom, they could have done it. I don't believe that. I'm not buying it. I believe that she ran as good a campaign as you could get. Or that Donald Trump won because he's an incredible campaigner. I don't believe Donald Trump was a great campaigner. I believe the big winner in the 2024 election is right-wing conservatism. Project 2025 won, Mitch McConnell won, the late Rush Limbaugh won, and states' rights won. I'm going to go into that. And what I'm saying there basically is that this is a historic. This didn't just happen just last year. This has been building up over time. And let me go over my approach. And I want you to know my analysis comes from several places. I've spent a lot of time reading and studying politics, but I'm a political novice. I'm not an expert. I'm not somebody who has spent their lives in politics. But I was trained by a trainer who was also a history major. Interviews I did with my father were on a previous podcast I did called The World as I Like It to Be. I'm going to eventually get to showing some clips from that. It's all audio, so I'll add it to the YouTube feed in a future video so that you can get more of an understanding of where I come from, hearing it directly from him. He has, over my lifetime, shared a great deal of knowledge that I believe to be true. I'm a person of faith. My understanding of things and my explanation of what I believe is happening in politics in America and in the world is colored by biblical teachings and understandings that I believe to be true. This video will have those references and beliefs featured. If you are turned off by that, then this is not the video series for you. I want to respect anybody who may have stumbled on this video, anyone who may have stumbled onto this series thinking that they were going to get just analysis from a secular point of view. I am not that guy. Everything I do is colored by everything I have learned over the years. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your viewpoint, that is going to include biblical references and teachings. That's not for you. If you think that that's all, a big con or a scam or whatever, this is not the video series for you. So, an analysis. What if she'd won? One of the things that I used to talk to people about privately is this idea of what happens if she wins. Is Donald Trump and the MAGA movement over? Have we turned a corner? Is the country now saved? I want to go into that right now. And I also want to feature a video. And I want to begin with this statement that the Harris campaign worked. Harris did a historic job on Tuesday, and it was just not enough. The lies over Bidenomics, the economy, and Joe Biden's presidency had what appears to be an insurmountable drain on the candidate. There's even some talk that the fix was in probably 2 years ago because it was insurmountable then. This is from Deadline White House. This is Matthew Dowd. Matthew Dowd is an analyst who has worked years, Bush campaign. He's worked tirelessly over the years talking about campaigns, talking about how to win campaigns and etc., going through the data, going through the information. He was one of those people who also believed, even on election night, that Harris was going to win. He has begun, and by the way, the data about what happened and how things got so wrong. I even talk about on my last video, the blue mirage of the Iowa poll. The reasons and how things got so far off are yet to be discussed. But we can come away with some early conclusions right now. This is from a Deadline White House.
But the problem fundamentally, which often happens in politics in a presidential election, is your fate is determined by the viewpoint of the incumbent president. And so on election day, according to the latest NBC exit polls, Joe Biden's approval rating was 40%, a net minus 18 approval rating. Every other president who's run for re-election in modern times ends up on election day with the same number they have in approval. The expectation with those fundamentals, ignoring all of the other data, and that approval was driven by perceptions of the economy, as you said to start the show, the expectation would be that a candidate for president by the Democrats or vice president would get around 40 or 41% of the vote. The Vice President Harris, is going to end up with 48% of the vote, which means for the first time in modern history, she's going to outrun the incumbent president's approval by 8 points. That's never happened before, never happened at all. And one of the things I think that we have to understand is with that in case, you look at every geography, you look at all the demography, and you say what happened. The most predictive factor of how people voted, no matter who they were, was their approval of President Biden. And so for me, when you look at this, and the interesting thing is in the 7 swing states, the vice president ran 4 points better than she did in all the other states when you look at where Donald Trump gained, which means he gained 7 points. Donald Trump gained 7 points in all the other 43 states and only gained 3 points in the swing states, which means her campaign worked.
So that's the most important thing I wanted to get out of that, is that the campaign worked. So this idea that there was something wrong with the campaign, that she needed more time, that it was too quick or whatever, Yes, all of that is probably true, but none of it would have made a bit of difference. And I'm going to go into why I think that's the case. But I want to go just down this little bit of a rabbit hole about what if she had won and what my concerns would have been. Because even if Harris had won, the best case scenario had Dems losing the Senate. One of the things that I've been saying privately is if Harris had won, her entire first year would have been caught up with Donald Trump yelling from the sidelines. His court cases would be front page tabloid news. Harris would be under pressure to pardon Trump. The Republican Party would continue to litigate 2020 and 2024 elections. That meant more divided government, no appointments to the court, no legislation done, and a possibly failed presidency. The other concern is that the real issue at the heart of MAGA would not get addressed. The GOP would continue obstructing, Democrats would bail them out, Republicans would move further and further to the right, and the smarter, more capable Trump would come to power in the future. There are only a handful of people that I know of that had been saying a similar thing like what I just said. And they were out there. Some of them were out there. But the concern that Donald Trump and Trumpism would go away and this flirting with fascism would go away after Harris had won is a fantasy. And one of the things, if you want to take a silver lining, or I don't even know if I'd call it a silver lining, but we're here, or we will be here come next year, where we always needed to be. And by that, I mean that at some point in time, America had to reckon with what's going on the right, with this flirtation with fascism, with the lies, with the belief that Republicans are better in the economy when they're not, that there is something great about being able to lie and get away with doing the wrong thing, and blocking legislation, supporting a man who's a felon. That eventually has to come back. And that has to begin to impact America. And we would like to go around thinking that we'll never pay any kind of a price for that, for things like the Iraq War, for things like, tearing up the Iran deal and etc. But part of what I think is I'm going to go into this a bit when I get into the biblical implications here, is America is finally going to have to confront what has been going on the right with the Trump presidency and with what Republicans have been ever since the Affordable Care Act, practically. I'd even go a little bit further back from that, but I want to keep going because I want to address this issue about the economy, and it's going to come up again, and already it's coming up in a lot of the conversation that Democrats are having. I'm hearing a lot of it. And, it's basically that Bidenomics was a failed project, and the economy has failed. America's economy is the envy of the world. That is a fact. That is simply a fact. Joe Biden was able to do something no country has. Biden was able to fight for increased wages, give people money during COVID, and keep unemployment at a historic low. Hasn't been done in my lifetime. He was able to do that and keep inflation from running rampant. Again, never happened in our lifetime, my lifetime. For that, the American people felt he needed to be thrown out of office, some of the lowest poll numbers in history. Trump runs with Elon Musk, who says Trump's plan, will be to cause quote unquote economic pain. And Trump wins because Americans believe that he's going to be better on the economy. Trump spent more time disparaging immigrants than he did talking about the economy. So call me skeptical, but this was not about the voters upset about the economy and running to Trump as a savior. I'll come back to this because it's a bigger point that's out there. People are talking a lot about that. So what if it's not about the economy, if it's not about Trump saving the economy, what was this about? This is about going back. This is what I like to call the enduring backlash. Past this prologue, I'm a Gen Xer who did not pay a lot of attention, as I think I said earlier, politics until Bush v. Gore. But my parents paid attention to politics. They were the generation of civil rights, alive during Selma, alive during Emmett Till, during the March on Washington, alive during the Vietnam protests, alive to see the signing of the Civil and Voting Rights Acts, alive to see the backlash, Jimmy Carter, crushing inflation, the recession, the rise of Russia as a nuclear threat, and most importantly, the Reagan Revolution. I was a kid during this time, but I remember it. I remember the feel of it. My father majored in history, and he made sure we knew it. Now, I know more about what happened to my country then during my childhood, and it speaks to what happened. I know about the conservative coalition created by Reagan, about Lee Atwater and the Southern Strategy, about the rise of conservatism. Stuart Stevens was there. So was Rick Wilson, and the founders of the Lincoln Project. Wilson created the infamous Willie Horton ad. Stevens wrote a book, an excellent book, said it was all a lie about his time as one of the most successful Republican operatives during that era. And if he can call it a lie, so can I. Right-wing conservatism in America, the true winners of 2024 election, is a lie. That's a major cause of Harris's loss, and that's a problem. Let me just say that I don't want to put words in Stuart Stevens' mouth. I think, it was all a lie. I'm going to talk about that book on another video at some point in time. I think he talks about Republicans as the liars. I'm saying that Republicans and conservatism are almost indistinguishable. They are two different things. One is an ideology, conservatism. The other, republicanism, is a political party. Republicans, as we already know, were not always conservatives. They were actually, the part of the abolitionist movement back before Jim Crow. Or actually before the 1960s. I just want to make that distinction. I don't want to put any words in Stuart Stevens' mouth, but he was there and he calls everything that they were doing a lie. The conservative movement before, during, and after Ronald Reagan was created to fight against the successes of the civil rights movement and racism, against the judicial decisions and the laws that helped African Americans and other groups gain freedoms and rights. With the win on Tuesday, all of that's in jeopardy. They want to roll back voting rights using the courts and federal law, roll back women's reproductive rights. We know states passed laws protecting women's rights, but they voted for Trump and for Republicans. And they, the conservatives, have said they will go further no matter what state laws, proposition, and amendments say. Project 2025 lays out the plan. Americans thought they were being clever with split ticket voting, but they were wrong. Conservatives will not let states' rights stop them. It was all a lie. And the American people were conned and were fooled into it. But what about Donald Trump? If this was all about the conservative movement that goes back to the 1960s, 70s forward, what role does Donald Trump play and why was he so successful? I believe Donald Trump is the anti-hero. And I question whether we were really fooled as a people or misled. This is a clip also from Deadline White House with analysis from Matthew Dowd on the voters and their feelings about the economy. Again, I want to bring this up again. He reiterates this. I want to bring it up again because this is something that is being said not only on the left, but on the right.
I think that we have to understand that there was a bunch of voters on Election Day that knew exactly all about Donald Trump. They knew they didn't like him. They didn't trust him. They didn't think he really had a plan, but he wasn't the incumbent. And in an environment that they basically knew this, and I think with trepidation, they voted for him. And I think that there's a lot of voters out there, especially non-college educated voters who have been suffering, that at times feel like they're lectured to. At times they feel like they're being told how to feel. You should feel bad about this, or you should feel this way about the economy, or you should feel, and they want to come to their own feelings. They want, and we may think they're wrong, they could be right, or whatever it is. It's their feelings. It's like any relationship that all of us have been involved with. When you try to tell somebody else how they should feel, it doesn't go well.
So I want to delve into this a little bit more. I don't want to spend too much more time with it, but I want to play that. I wanted to play that out to come back to the point I made earlier and the point I'm making about lies. And I want to tie this into the failure of the Democratic Party, which I believe contributed to this loss. First, the feelings. I don't believe it. I don't believe this is about the economy and economic anxiety. This is what was said by pundits the last time Democrats got wiped out during the Tea Party wave. Further analysis found out it was about racial animus and fear over Barack Obama. Take a look at that book, White Rule Rage, that came out earlier. It's race once again. We have to be clear-eyed about this. Donald Trump spent years talking about poisoning the blood of our country, these migrants, poisoning the blood of our country. He repeatedly lied about immigrants, most famously on the debate stage saying that they were eating dogs and cats. And his concern about immigration is primarily on black and brown immigrants. Why do I say that? Remember, his wife and her family are immigrants, but from Eastern Europe, white immigrants, not black or brown. Democrats cannot be fooled into repeating this narrative about the economy. So, where are Democrats at fault here? Democrats are at fault, and I'm already hearing it, is that they are taking up the line yet again, just like they did during the Tea Party wave, after the Tea Party wave, and they're getting the exact wrong diagnosis about what was happening with the country. They're going back to this about economic anxiety, and they are unwilling to and unable, for whatever reason, to call it what it is. This is racism. You have people on the right, Lincoln Project people who were former Republicans, who will admit that this is about race. Stuart Stevens, the same Stuart Stevens who did it was all a lie. He comes out and says we cannot stop talking about that. This isn't about race. This is about race, not economic anxiety. Democrats will do themselves a favor if they remember that and focus on that and talk about that and bring that up and focus on it, because they do not want to touch this thing about race. It goes back to a big problem that came out of the 1960s and the Reagan revolutions, where Democrats turned on civil rights leaders and on African Americans in some cases regarding busing and regarding the integration of communities. Democrats of today did not want to do anything about making sure that what was happening in the civil rights movement and the laws did not hurt their communities, their white communities that were against it. Joe Biden of the 1970s was against busing. And Kamala Harris, during the debate in 2019, took him to task for that. People may not remember that. But the desire for Democrats to fall in line with Republicans over the issue of race and call it something else, economic anxiety, crime, drugs, whatever you want to call it, all of that do not fall. They are constantly falling into this trap. Going back to it, I want to repeat that Donald Trump never had a strategy. He never even articulated a strategy on the economy except for tariffs. And anybody who looks at it, who knows anything about the economy and about how economies work, know that tariffs are a total disaster. For decades, for my entire life, Republicans, particularly so-called conservative Republicans, were against tariffs. Now, all of a sudden, they don't mind tariffs. They're okay with it. Donald Trump, last time he pushed tariffs across, had to spend money to farmers who were going broke over those tariffs. Voters went to the polls knowing about Trump. That was the most important thing that Matthew Dowd said that I wanted to play. Voters went to the polls knowing who Trump was and voted for him anywhere. There's a biblical truism and universal law that is helpful here. Matthew 7:18 says, "A healthy tree cannot bear rotten fruit, and a rotten tree cannot bear healthy fruit." The American people voted for a man who is not a good man, knowing he was not a good man, knowing he was a felon, knowing what people around him said about him. And they voted for him to do good things for them and the country. They were wrong. The universe does not work like that. The other thing I want to do is I want to talk about this because I did a video about this some time ago. Why are Americans so eager to believe in Trump? And I believe that in a previous video, I explained this before, that I believe Trump has caught America in a love scam. Donald Trump is a love scammer. And I think it's a better way to understand what has happened to America and who Trump is than to call him a fascist, a demagogue, all these other politically highfalutin words. Love scammer. People understand that. People have been touched by it. I know of at least 2 people who have been love scammed. Catfishing is another thing. It is a real thing. And people who are love scammed are usually broken, lonely, desperate, and are conned into believing someone sees them, hears them, and cares about them. And that someone worms their way into their victims' lives and takes everything he or she has and walks away. And no one, not friends, not family, can talk them out of it. There are stories that play out in docuseries that you can find on Netflix and Max. The idea that that something that Harris could have said or someone else could have said could have changed the voting, the way people see this, is wrong. America's love scammed. People who are in a love scam cannot be pulled out of it. And ironically, one person who was on stage there at Madison Square Garden last week, Dr. Phil, should know something about this, because he spent many, many episodes of his very popular show talking to people who were love scammed. So this is a thing, and I think I don't want to minimize it or play it down. This is a real thing, and it has real victims and real lives. The New York Times in October featured a story about a man named Alfred Mancinelli, who was bled dry by an online scammer. When Chris Mancinelli walked into his father's home for the first time after the 79-year-old man died last summer, he stopped to look at family photos displayed on the refrigerator door. Near a crayon drawing spelling out Grandpa in rainbow colors were photos of his father's 3 granddaughters at a swimming pool. But one image jumped out, a photo of Alexa Bliss, a professional wrestling personality. Mr. Mancinelli's father, Alfred, was completely smitten with the star, or at least with the con artist impersonating her. He was convinced he was in a romantic relationship with Miss Bliss, leading him to give up about $1 million in retirement savings and his granddaughter's college funds to the impersonator and a varied cast of online fraudsters he interacted with over several years. Mr. Mancinelli tried to intervene, moving his father's last $100,000 into a safe account. Alfred sued him. His loyalty was to Lexi. Mr. Mancinelli and others who have tried to awaken their loved ones from this trance often feel powerless, even after they've done everything to shatter the fiction that protects their assets. They say it's as if their parent had been brainwashed into a cult. In some ways, they were. The victims were slowly groomed by con artists, posing as love interests, investment advisors, or government officials, among others. Once ensconced inside the bubble, they are unable or unwilling to acknowledge that they have become victims, even when their own children are warning them of the con. So this is really powerful and significant stuff, and it seems silly and it seems odd and it seems like, wow, who would do that? That's so silly, blah, 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 blah. But this is a real thing. And I think that we need to really recognize that there is something in the heart of America that is broken, and that Donald Trump has been able to tap into that thing. A good amount of America, I mean, it was about as close to a modern day landslide. A good amount of Americans believe that this man will save them and do the right thing for them. They feel seen by him. They feel like he is one of them. They feel like they have embraced him, as if he is really the right person to lead this country going forward. And we need to really begin to do a reckoning, particularly those who are in the opposition, quote unquote, the left, the Democrats, whatever, because we need to figure out what is going on with Americans that are broken. People are talking about American males. I think it's across the board. We know that males disproportionately made up the Donald Trump base, Hispanic males, certainly white males, etc. But I believe that there's more going on here as well, because we didn't get as much of a lift from women, white women in particular, or other racial women, as we probably needed to offset what was going on. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to bring up is this other very interesting thing, and I might be out on a limb on this one, but I personally believe it's relevant. In addition to being a swindler, Donald Trump is an anti-hero. And America has a love affair with anti-heroes. The Sopranos, The Godfather, The Joker. Americans love a guy who commits crimes and gets away with it. The outlaw, the bandit. These guys just don't give a damn about the system because it's corrupt. And he's being punished and persecuted by a corrupt system, so they naturally gravitate to this individual. I think that there is something to be said about this. I think it's significant. Take it for what it's worth. But I think it also plays into the part of why people see that they're being seen by him. And ironically, I think the more and more he was prosecuted, Atlanta, New York, Florida, etc., the more and more popular he had become amongst the pop culture sort of thing, and even I think to some extent even amongst minorities. So about lies and the story we tell ourselves, Mark Twain's famous statement about a lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth is putting on its shoes is significant here. But what also is significant is the Bible, because the Bible has a little something to say about lies. And conservatives should know this, particularly the so-called evangelical base of the Trump wing. Conservatism is not built on solid ground. It is built on what appears to be solid ground, which is lies. The Bible in Matthew 7:24 says the wise man builds his house on solid ground. Another word for ground is foundation. And the biblical parable talks about two types of foundation. There is what appears to be solid ground, which is sand, compacted sand. And there is the true solid foundation, stone, rock, and bedrock. Conservatism is built on lies. Lies are sand in this metaphor. Lies about American history, lies about in the economy, about inequality, about science, about vaccines, about masks, about shutdowns. Lies about the economy. When the New York Times dared to offer a vision of America, an America that was deeply tied to slavery with the 1619 Project, the opposition called it wokeism. Facts were ignored and dismissed. Book burnings began with a vengeance, and a movement that kept the Trump campaign alive was born. One of the things I want to talk about, and this is the last video as I come to the end and I start closing this out, is having the right ideas, right? So we know lies are a problem. We know that this is something that conservatism and I believe Donald Trump has used to keep him alive, to give him oxygen. But we have to remember and remain clear-eyed about this. Again, in future videos, I'm going to talk about this. But when you begin to go against what I believe to be universal/biblical truisms, you begin to court a danger. Bad things begin to happen when you begin to go outside of what I would call universal or biblical law or truisms, you might want to call it. When you begin to build your house on sand, when the storm comes, everything falls apart. And part of what is, and I don't like bringing this out to talk about it because I don't want to wish bad things on the country, on the nation, on people. But I just want people to be recognized and aware of the fact that nothing good can come of this. It may appear good for a while. Things may look good for a while. And we have seen that Republicans get in office, they screw the pooch, they get the hell out, Democrats come in to clean up their mess, and then Democrats are criticized for it. Every single Democrat that's taken over has happened, including Joe Biden. But we can't sacrifice our own morals and our own values and the things that are right. It was right to fight for immigrants. It was right to continue to fight for wage increases. It was right to continue to fight for civil rights, for women's rights. We need to be strategic in the future, and I'll talk about that in my next video. But right now, let me get to this last video. This is, again, from Deadline White House. This is David Jolly talking about this very thing.
Because I think Democrats need a little boost in the arm right now. Winning doesn't make you right, and losing doesn't make you wrong.
Oh, thank you.
This is truly, I mean, all this introspection of Democrats, of course, we'll talk about it. But just because you lost a race doesn't make your values wrong. And it doesn't mean
or your candidate.
Or your candidate. And it doesn't mean you need to reconsider your values. Steph and I talked about this last night. First of all, the now minority political coalition in the country is as strong as it's ever been. It's at 48 or 49% of the country. So it's not like somehow it got wiped out. I also know this. I spent the last year visiting with Democratic clubs in the state of Florida. And I know this as a journey, as a former Republican now visiting with Democratic clubs in Florida. The values of today's Democratic Party are the values that will take our country forward. They're the values that protect individual liberty, freedom, and economy for all people. They're the values that represent fairness in our economy and in our culture. And they're the values that lift everybody up. That is not the Republican Party. So this introspection of what did we do wrong, I think is a procedural and tactical question. It is not a values-based question. And Democrats today need to be as proud of their values as they were yesterday.
Okay, so my final tips and takeaways. So to answer the question on how we got here, here it is. We got here because almost 60 years ago, the country decided it wanted to change. It passed laws and interpreted the Constitution in a way that would guarantee rights to minorities, women, and workers. Conservatism was born out of opposition to those advances. They were the true winners on Tuesday, not Trump. But conservatism is built on lies. Americans voted, but they've been scammed into thinking Trump can do good for the country and her people. Project 2025 says something else. We also got here because of lies. Joe Biden is a great president whose only mistake is that he's not a miracle worker. He solved inflation, consumer spending is up, wages are up, we avoided a recession, his approval numbers are abysmal. Harris or any Democrat could not overcome this. What have we learned and what do we need to do? That's going to be on my next video. So once again, to reiterate, we're here because America could not get over its fixation over going back to the pre-1960s era. And conservatism has been at this a long time, over 50 years. I would say almost 60 years since after the civil rights movement. And this long-term project has gone through the 70s, 80s, 90s, early aughts to the early 2010s, all the way to what we saw on Tuesday. Make no mistake, this is a long-term project and it has finally come to its fruition. What comes next is going to be very, very interesting for America and for the rest of us. Will it work? Will it not work? Stay tuned for my next video. Thank you for joining me on today's video, and you'll see me on the next one. Take care, everyone. Hey there, fantastic viewers. Eric Darnley Small here, and I hope you're loving today's episode of What You Missed. You've reached the end of today's show, but don't worry, there's more show coming up. If you're watching this on YouTube, please click the bell so that you'll be notified when more content is available. You can also help the channel by clicking the like and subscribe buttons. It helps the YouTube algorithm find new viewers so that I can keep bringing you all this incredible content you enjoy. But wait, there are more ways to support the show. You can make a contribution through the show's PayPal, which goes a long way in helping produce even better content for you. And consider becoming a part of our growing community by joining our Mastodon site at mastodon.vtip.me/@whatyoumissed for more engaging discussions and exclusive updates. And here's something you won't want to miss. Mark your calendars for our live show streaming on YouTube and stream.vtip.me Monday mornings, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Your support means the world to me, and together we're making What You Missed the best it can be. Thanks for being a part of my journey.